Welcome to Skip the Queue, a podcast for people working in or working with visitor attractions. I'm your host, Kelly Molson. Each episode, I speak with industry experts from the attractions world. These chats are fun, informative, and hopefully always interesting. In today's episode, I'm joined by two guests. Carlton Gajadhar, a visitor experience professional and co-founder of the Visitor Experience Forum, and Rachel Mackay, manager of historic royal palaces at Kew, including Kew Palace and the Great Pagoda. We discuss lockdown experiences in both the UK and Kuwait, crisis management for museums and heritage organisations, and improving sector cooperation. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and all the usual channels by searching Skip the Queue. Oh, guys, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's really, really lovely to have you both on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us. We're really excited to come and join you today. So yeah, let's do this.
Let's do that. Well, I mean, you know how this podcast starts, right? So it's icebreaker question time. Right, I've got really good ones for you both. Right, Carlton, I'm going to start with you first. So what would be your superpower and why?
I would say invisibility. Yeah. I can go anywhere and everywhere and nobody will be able to see me. And I can kind of snoop on people and get all the juicy gossip and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love that.
That's what I would do.
I'd 100%. We'd all take that opportunity, wouldn't we?
No.
Right, Rachel, I've got a good one for you. What's your favourite Eurovision song?
Wow, you've done your research. Okay, good. My God. Well, that's an easy one. It would have to be the last time the UK won. So 1997, Katrina and the Waves, Love Shine a Light. That is the best song. But I do think that like almost every Eurovision song is a banger. There's only a few that are not. So, you know, I could really choose anyone, but that's got to be the best one. I actually cry when I listen to it. It's a real emotional experience for me. It's
a really good song, though. It's surprising how many good songs have come out of Eurovision, right?
No, it's not a surprise. It's a fantastic musical contest.
It is glorious. I've got really good memories of listening to it with my nan, weirdly. And my nan was a massive Eurovision fan. What about, so while we're on this topic, what about the Icelandic song from this year? Because that was good.
Yes,
I was actually
awesome.
Thinking about whether I should buy tickets to see them in April because I think they're fantastic. Yeah. And I really want to go to Iceland. I've never been. And I think, well, actually, they could win next year now that they've got a bit of a following now.
Massive.
And so I think 2022 Reykjavik, I'll see you there.
I mean, you would love Iceland. It is a great place. We went about 3 years ago and it is genuinely it's been the best place that I've ever been. It is so spectacular and so different. And I'm a bit of a winter girl, really. I kind of like coats and hats and boots and stuff. So it's my dress vibe there.
I went to Lisbon in 2018. That was the first time I'd actually been to the contest, and it was just amazing. Like the kind of cooperation between everybody and how much everybody loved each other. Like it was just hugging everybody that was wearing all different flags, and especially kind of post Brexit, it was just such a lovely feeling.
Oh,
it's one of the best weekends of my life.
Oh, that's amazing! I'm so glad I did my homework with this question. Right, Carlton, back to you. Oh, I like this question. Right, if you can have an unlimited supply of one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, I love pasta.
Oh, yeah.
I can eat pasta until I die. Honestly, any sauce, any shape of pasta, just bring it on.
Carb fest, massive
Bring
carb
it
fest.
on. Yes, I love pasta.
Oh yeah. I'm so with you on that one, actually.
Mm.
Although I'd be a whale because carbs and me, we just don't agree.
Oh, don't worry about that. It's fine.
You've got the physique for it. You've got the metabolism and the physique for the carb overloading.
Of course.
Right. Okay. Last icebreaker question, and then it's on to the unpopular opinions. Rachel, what fictional family would you be a member of if you could?
Oh, the family from Schitt's Creek, definitely. They're fantastic. They're just like, I don't know if you watch that show, but like it just, it just gets better and better, and you just love them more and more and more as it goes on. And all four of them are hilarious. Sometimes I talk like Moira Rose now, which is a real bad habit to break. But yeah, definitely The Roses from Schitt's Creek.
I've just started it. That has been recommended to me so many times. It's brilliant.
It gets better and better and better. I think the moment where you fall in love with it is the last episode of season 2, and then it just gets better from then on in.
Good tip.
Yeah.
Good questions, good answers as well. Thank you. Right, unpopular opinions. What is something that you believe to be true that hardly anybody else agrees with you on?
I had thought of something, but now I feel like if I say it, people will think I'm a bit one track. But it is to do with Eurovision. So I wouldn't want people to get the wrong idea about you. But my unpopular opinion is, and this is actually true, which is that the best music of the 20th and 21st century has come out of the Eurovision Song Contest. Okay. And that also the Eurovision Song Contest is like a great mirror of like European politics and actually a really intellectual form of study. When I was at uni, we did a module on international relations, and you had to come prepared with like a current news topic. And I would always come in and want to talk about the Eurovision Song Contest, and they just could have rolled my eyes at me. And I'm like, look, you want to see European politics in action, just watch Eurovision Song Contest. It's so easy. So yeah.
Did anyone agree with you? Was this a really unpopular opinion?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Although there are people who have like degrees, because I've been to a Eurovision conference, and people have degrees in Eurovision, like they do their postgrads in kind of Eurovision studies and all that kind of stuff. So it's, yeah.
This is amazing. I actually have a friend who's another agency owner who is a huge Eurovision fan, and she's going to love this episode. Well, look, this is the first time on this podcast that we've had 2 guests on at the same time, and I'm really glad that you've both come on. There is a big reason for it. So you both work in very similar roles, and you both know each other as well, which is great. You both have the Visitor Experience Forum in common, which we're going to talk about in a little while. But what is really key and what is really shines through with both of you is that you have this real kind of passion and drive for improving sector cooperation. And that's what we want to talk about on podcasts today. And that's why you're both on. But I think for us to get to the grips of why that's key for you both and the things that you've been doing for the last few months to help that, we kind of have to go backwards a little bit. So I'm going to ask you both about your experiences. And Rachel, I want to start with you. If you can kind of share with us a little bit about what your lockdown experience has been like. You know, what have you been able to do? What have you not been able to do? And how have you spent your time actually? Because I know that you've been furloughed for some time of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, firstly, obviously I was very lucky that, you know, I wasn't personally affected by COVID and nobody I knew was. So, you know, there's that side of things where you're just lucky that was your lockdown. But also I got to spend most of it in Scotland, and that was great to have a bit of fresh air and space and stuff like that. So that side of things was all really nice. There was a bit of frustration in that, and I'm sure this is the case for so many people, the timing of the lockdown was quite cruel, and particularly for this sector, because it's just when you're about to open up. And we were just about to open an exhibition at Kew Palace, which has been a real labour of love for me, like, you know, 3 years in the planning, all about King George III and his mental health. And it's such an important topic, and one I'm really passionate about it. And one, you know, I've really tried to bring this exhibition into being, and we were like 1 week away from doing it, and then all of a sudden it just went.
No.
That was awful. And you know, at the start where you still had events in your diary, and it was like, oh, today would have been the press day, today would have been the opening day, you know. Oh, that was awful, really, really annoying. But I know that lots of people were in that situation as well. And then, yeah, as you said, I was furloughed quite early on, and I did not take that well. I'll be honest with you.
You know, that's really it's interesting, because a lot of people that I've spoken to in kind of my agency world where they've been furloughed, there's been really mixed kind of feelings about it. It really, for some, it felt like a real sense of rejection. Yes. And that's really hard to take, right, in any circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complete ego thing. I just couldn't bear the idea that I wasn't critical to the business. And, you know, it made total sense, because my site is seasonal. We took the decision we weren't going to open this year. So I'm kind of not needed now until next year. But it was a real kind of blow to the ego. And I feel awful for my boss. Like, I made such a barking fuss of it and was really, you know, really whinging at him. But yeah, that kind of took a bit of getting used to, and a bit of kind of having to get to grips with that idea, because it's a real blow to the ego. And like, I'm somebody who I've got a lot tied up in work, and that's really important to me. So to have that sort of taken away was like a real loss for a few days while I got my head around that idea.
Yeah. And Carlton, while we were stuck in the UK and Scotland, you were locked down somewhere completely different, weren't you? So you were out in Kuwait. Can you tell us a bit about what you were doing out there and what it was like?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I was stuck in Kuwait during the Corona period. So I was the head of guest experience for a brand new attraction called Salam Palace Museum. So the museum was set up by the government to get people to experience how the palace used to be like before the invasion of Kuwait in 1990. So the place literally was in ruins after the war. And what the palace was used for before that was kind of to, it's kind of like a stately home, I would say, where international guests like the Queen and Diana will come and stay if they did a royal visits to Kuwait. So it's very high profile location. So my role was to help with all the operations. I had a team of 16 and we led the VIP element of the organization, all the tours of the museum, as well as all the back office like the call center and that kind of stuff on there. So it was very interesting regarding lockdown because the government, I will say, they did a really good job in Kuwait where they shut everything down straight away. It's kind of like, let's shut everything down and let's see what happens. I think they can afford that as a government because they kind of dependent on oil money. So for them, it was kind of like, okay, we can kind of manage all of that. But as a museum, it was really tricky because I think everyone was in this situation worldwide. We had no idea kind of what to do in that scenario where we've had loads of pre-booked tickets, kind of contacting our guests saying, hey, you know, we're not open at the moment. And then trying to understand what to do with our staff after that as well. Yeah. So it was a very, very tricky situation for us. And was it amazing?
Was it similar to what it was like here? You know, were you allowed out? Could you go to the supermarket, that kind of stuff?
It was very, very different. It was like in two types of lockdown. So you had a lockdown, which meant that all retail outlets and leisure outlets were all closed. So everything was closed except for supermarkets and pharmacies and hospitals. So they were the three things that were opened. And then on top of that, we had a curfew.
Ah, right.
So we were only allowed to go out of our homes for a specific time. I think the most challenging one we had was 22 hours curfew. So 22 hours in our homes, and then 2 hours we were all allowed to leave. 45-degree weather.
Wow.
So if you didn't leave, you'd be literally stuck in your house. So I decided, why not start doing a 10K walk in 45-degree weather?
Of course. It's exactly what would have gone through my mind.
Of course, something to do. So that's kind of what I did during lockdown. And kind of just been there for my staff kind of on WhatsApp and just making sure that everyone was okay. Unfortunately, at that point, my contract finished. So I was literally stuck in Kuwait.
Wow.
Because the airport wasn't open.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so it was a challenging period, but amazing at the same time.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear about everybody's individual experiences and what we've been through. I think even mine, it's horrible to kind of say it out loud sometimes because I know how difficult it's been, but actually there was elements of mine that was really pleasant. It was easy for us all to kind of pick up our laptops, pick up our computers and work from home. It's a very lucky position to be in. But I quite liked working from home. I quite enjoyed that kind of that slightly slower pace of life, not having to rush around quite a lot was quite nice. But I think I'm thinking back now to when it first kind of started to happen. And my first thought when we saw our clients who are in the kind of attractions world and tourism world, when we saw them starting to close and then we could see the effect that it was going to have long term, my instant reaction was like, what can we actually do to help? You know, what is there that we have that we can help? And we started, I think I sat down one Saturday and just started to pull together loads of resources that were being put out. People were very generous with their time and with the information that they were kind of putting out there. And so, yeah, I started a blog where I started to collate support and advice for the industry and kind of bring it all together. And what I liked about what the two of you did as well, and this is how we get around to talking about the sector cooperation, is that it's kind of what you did as well in various guises. Rachel, you shared a post on LinkedIn that I saw that was a toolkit that you put together for frontline managers, and it was slightly kind of later down the process, so a few months after kind of lockdown, but it was about how people could bring their front of house team back safely and what was important to them. And I thought, this is fantastic. You know, it's such a generous thing to do, to put that kind of information out there. How did that come about? How did you start to do that?
Yeah, so, well, one of the things that I guess was a bit upset about in terms of furlough was that, you know, as an operations manager, you wait your whole life for something like this to happen, and so you can really get in there and manage a crisis, you know. And then I couldn't, because I was on furlough, so I was just like, well, this is a terrible nightmare. And so one of the things I did just to try and keep my head in the game was to go out on Twitter and just ask if anybody needed a hand with their reopening plans, because like that's something I really enjoyed doing, opening places. And you know, Carlton's the same. There's a real rush about reopening somewhere or opening somewhere. It's like, it's all good, and everybody was doing that. And so I talked to a few different organisations and helped them just kind of go run through their reopening plans and just kind of troubleshoot them and try and suggest things and that sort of thing. And so that was really good and kind of kept my head in the game. But then there was a common thread throughout a lot of those conversations and some of the kind of wider discussions within the sector about front of house and the fact that most of them were furloughed and so not really being consulted about what was going to happen when they came back. And then from a financial point of view, they were kind of mostly going to be brought back quite soon before they were then expected to be on the floor, delivering a completely different role, you know, from what we've always asked them to do. We've always encouraged people to be very engaging and, you know, and not trying to get away from that idea, particularly in museums, of the kind of warder and the sort of policing of the space. And now we were going to have to ask them to do that. And that's not what we hired them for, not what we trained them for. So it's a completely different role. And then another thing was that a lot of first line managers, so people who have come into their first kind of supervisor or team leader or management job, a lot of them are, you know, quite young. It's maybe their first manager job. And I was just worried that there wasn't going to be that support there for them to sort of think through what they were going to have to do, because everybody was so busy and so stretched. And so what I want to do with that was just create something that was like not a manual, because every site is going to be really different, but just a sort of toolkit just to help people think through the things that they want to, you know, how they can best support front of house. And so I asked, there's a lot of front of house people on Twitter, and I asked them what they wanted to see when they came back, and I thought about my own experience because I've worked front of house as well, and kind of put together something that I thought would be helpful. Yeah.
And it's been really well received, hasn't it? And you've gone on and added, you've actually now started a blog and added more and more resource to that as well. So there's obviously been a demand for that kind of information and help.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there was that, then there was other stuff to do with the fact, so I was doing also my master's research in crisis management at the same time. So there was resources that came out of that as well. So eventually I just kind of needed a place to put all this stuff and to allow people to access it, and also to point to other resources that were being helpful at the time, because there was lots of other stuff coming out from the sector as well. And so, yeah, that's why I started that website, just to have a place really to kind of put all this stuff so that it can continue to be useful. It's
brilliant. I think, you know, if it's one of the heartwarming things that has come out of all of this is how generous people have been and wanting to help and help others. And I think that I'd love to see that continue within the sector. I mean, it's definitely, I can see that that's happening. It's happened in other sectors as well. There's been, you know, so much advice that's been out there for kind of agency leaders that we've been able to kind of draw down on and share with as well. Carlton, prior, you know, this has been set up for quite a number of years, but the VE Forum, the Visitor Experience Forum, you're a co-founder of that forum, right? Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because what I saw was some really great kind of engagement in that community over lockdown, and also you put out webinars and things to kind of help the sector.
Yeah. So yeah, we started in 2016. So there's four of us, and we were all kind of like heads of departments in the various attractions. And I remember we were just sitting down and we're just talking like, okay, like we're having all these issues, and I bet there's other people in the same shoes as us that have the same issues, but we just don't have the opportunity to talk about it. So we kind of decided let's kind of just do like a little small event, you know, a little meetup event in a bar, and we did, and we slowly found out that there was a massive need for a space for people just to talk. I call it like the counselling sessions, especially our meetups, because as this experienced professionals, we're constantly on the go. We just don't stop. So having that space to do so, and it's been amazing, the warmth and the welcome that we've received from people from all over the sector. It's been amazing. Like so far, we've got about 700 members.
Wow.
That is linked to the forum, from around about 350 attractions and businesses. And then we have an associate members as well, which is about 250 that makes up. And then alongside that, we have sponsors as well. And with the combination of these people, we're literally making the industry better in kind of problem solving and sharing information in a very cool and safe environment where they can do so. We mainly aim for kind of management level, so anyone kind of from heads of departments and up, that can come in and kind of share ideas and areas. And we do also organize 6 different types of events, from meetups, as I mentioned. We do a seminar on an annual basis. Last time we did, we had about 300 people turn up for both our seminar and our awards ceremony, which we're really, really proud about. But the main purpose of the forum is literally sharing information and learning from each other. And that is the key of what we do. We are all volunteers as well. So we don't get paid to do any of this. We do this kind of the goodness of our hearts, because we're passionate about the sector, and we love what we do, and we just want to make sure that people enjoy their jobs as well as we do as well. So yeah.
It's brilliant. And I think it's that kind of field of dreams type scenario, isn't it? If you build it, they will come. So, you know, you've built it, and now people are really kind of coming and they're really engaged with it. Is that quite a new thing for the sector though? Has it always been like this? Or is that, you know, just in recent years, people have become a bit more kind of open to peer-to-peer learning and sharing experiences with each other?
I think there are other organisations that are out there, but they're paid. And I think that's a massive barrier for people that want to learn, that don't really have high-paying jobs or not in really critical roles. So we kind of saw a need of them type of people, kind of just like being there for someone who just needs an extra helping hand, who's not linked to your organisation. It makes such a difference.
Yes, and you've put. So some of the things that you've been doing to support the industry during lockdown, you put out a number of webinars. You had a specialist LinkedIn group, which it was a really great place to go, because what was lovely is that every day there was kind of updates being posted in there about, the Alva updates, what was happening. And so it was kind of a real time support for everybody that was a member of that group, and they could see, all of the information that you were putting in there.
Exactly. We're here to support people in the industry, and anything we can do as a team to do so, we will. So we're all about open communication. So if members have any questions about procurement, or how do I organise my queuing system during COVID, like what are you guys doing, then they have that space on LinkedIn where they can have them conversations. So they don't even have to wait for us. as a visitor experience forum, they can actually take the initiative themselves with the group of people around them to build that network and build that connection. So everybody can make sure our visitors has the best experience possible.
Yeah. And Rachel, you're a member of the visitor experience, so you kind of see it from the other side as well. So Carlton's talked a lot about, how it's been set up and what they do. How have you found it as a member? Have you felt, there's been an awful lot of support for you and it's been useful?
Yeah, it's a fantastic group. I mean, I think one of the best events I think that they do are the hacks. They are my absolute favorite. So hacks are like when somebody has a particular problem. So, for example, I held a hack when I worked at the Natural History Museum because I was trying to get rid of the dinosaur queue, which if anybody's ever been to the Natural History Museum, you'll know is quite big. And you have a hack, you just say, I've got this problem, and you send out the bat signal, and the visitor experience forum sort of descend with people who are interested in solving that problem, and you all sit around a table and kind of hash it out. And there was one recently at the London Transport Museum looking at their kind of entrance. It's just the most fun, and it's so good if you're the person that has the problem, because you have people who are interested in that problem. Whereas in operations, usually you're the only person in your organisation. Whereas these are all attractions, operations, absolute geeks, and I mean that in the best way possible. And that's brilliant. But then as well, just to sort of be a participant in them, it's so refreshing to focus on somebody else's problems for a while. The one at the Transport Museum I really enjoyed, and that's just a really great thing to do, and something that wouldn't, I don't think, happen in a lot of other sectors as well. But the sector is like that. It is very open and very sharing, and I think the other side of it as well is the social side. I mean, I love visitor attractions people. They're just the most fun. They've all got really dark, awful senses of humour, and I just have that kind of personality where they're just fun people to kind of go and get a drink with. And so that kind of social side is definitely something that we need to think about how we're going to try and take that forward with the kind of social restrictions that are in place at the moment. But that's a really important thing. It's not just about the information and the sharing of experiences, that moral support as well.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I guess, Carlton, you've got a bit of a challenge on your hand in terms of how you plan kind of the events that usually you'd be running events all throughout the year, but I guess now we're kind of looking at 2021 and what that means and how you run them in the best way. Yes, we've all sat on webinars. They've had varying degrees of success, right? Let's face it. They're not all brilliant.
Sharing,
but you're very much kind of being talked at a lot of the time, and it's less collaborative in a way. So I guess that's a challenge for you in terms of how you run a hack. Can you do this virtually now? How do we make those work? What was lovely is I saw that there was a quiz night, wasn't there? There was a visitor experience forum quiz night, and I know that went down really well. And I guess, like you say, Rachel, that's a big part of being part of an organisation and a group like this, that it's that social side of things. So it's really lovely to see that could at least carry on.
Yeah, that was a really good night. So I was hosting that with another member of the group, and we kept on bringing after a round, we just would bring somebody up on the screen. So like Carlton popped up from Kuwait with his little orange juice, and it was so nice to see people. It was just so nice to sort of see people in their back gardens or wherever they were, and just we hadn't seen our friends for a really long time, and it was so nice to get together and chat. It was really good. It was a really good evening.
Yeah, it's lovely. So what are the plans, Carlton? Do you have kind of an idea about what it will look like for 2021 at the moment, or is that all still kind of up in the air?
It's at the moment it's still up in the air. So we're still really focused in organising these events, but we just kind of have to wait and see. And because of the social distancing measures and gatherings as well, that's set by the government, we just have to be very, very mindful and respect what's been said. But we're still keen on organising our seminars, our wall ceremonies, our meetups. Some of them we might just have to continue doing it virtually, which is not ideal, but at least we could still have that contact with our members. We also do one-to-ones as well, so people will reach out to myself and other co-founders and try and get like advice and stuff. So I did a lot of that when I was in Kuwait. So attractions would just kind of reach out and say, hey, we have this issue, can I get some advice? I'm like, yeah, no problem. Happy to help on there. I think what I was going to say, one of my favourite events that we do at the forum is a seminar. And Rachel's been great. She's actually spoke at the seminar, and how it is, it's like a mini TED talk. So
a very generous way of describing what
no, seriously, no, it's great. No, so the mini TED talk, the speaker has 10 minutes to kind of share their message. And I remember Rachel was sharing her message about her pagoda opening, and kind of the real...
You think that's a euphemism?
It's not that kind of show, Rachel.
Oh, isn't it? Oh, sorry, I forgot.
That was a building at Kew that we were...
Thank you for clarifying that.
What I love about the forum is us giving opportunities for our members to do stuff that they would not normally do as well. So speaking at our conferences and building that confidence and building their personal profile. We've had 2 of our members actually go to America to actually speak at other visitor experience conferences based on their talk in our conference, which is fantastic. So anything we can do to support. I think, Rachel, I don't know if you remember this guy called James. It was like a young guy from the London Transport Museum.
Yes.
And he was brilliant because he was like an apprentice at the London Transport Museum. And he was like talking to us, like there's a room, 100 field people, visitor experience professionals. And he goes like, if you like working in this industry, if you like working there, I will really recommend it. And it was so brilliant to kind of having him talking about how the industry is for him. But sometimes we forget because we're so caught up in our jobs. It's kind of really refreshing, and that's kind of what our seminars are all about. Just giving a new perspective or reminding us of how we used to feel back in the day, and so we can go back to our team.
There's not that many conferences where it's free. It's all focused on visitor experience. You've got your front of house people there, you've got front of house people speaking, you've got front of house people winning awards. Like, there's not that many things in the industry where that would actually happen. So it's just very grounded, very simple, but absolutely fantastic.
Oh, it's lovely. Do you know what was really nice as well is while you were talking about that, Carlton, your face was literally like lit up. There was a real kind of, but it's nice. There was a real kind of sense of like I think pride, probably, because you've created something that it gives people these opportunities. But it's really heartwarming to see, What I just want to go back to is you mentioned about offering people, one-to-one advice and just, being completely open to help. And that for me is the one thing that has been so, again, heartwarming again to see throughout this crisis is people just saying, I'm here, like hit me up, I can help. Rachel, I know that you've been offering pro bono, one-to-ones with people as well. Is that to share, you talked a little bit about your MA research into crisis management. Is that to share some of your learnings from that with them about the situation?
Yeah, so the research I was doing, which was meant to be on my exhibition, and of course didn't be, so I swiftly changed it to crisis management, which felt quite pertinent. But yeah, that research was essentially, I did 10 interviews with visitor operations people about their kind of experiences of shutting down. So, and they were just, those transcripts have just ended up being the most kind of fascinating and often actually quite emotional accounts of like, what's really the kind of couple of the most challenging weeks in somebody's career usually. So yeah, there's a lot that's come out of that in terms of learning. And I feel that what a lot of our organisations haven't had the time to do yet is actually sit down and look at their experience of that initial phase of like crisis management and the shutdown, and kind of have a bit of a wash up and a bit of a lessons learned, which most people would do in any normal circumstance. But because this is a very odd shape of crisis and it's kind of not over yet, and it's kind of mutating into another crisis of a financial recession, people have been so focused on reopening and staying open that there just hasn't been the time to do that, and it's a really valuable learning opportunity. So what I'm going to be doing with a few organisations over the next few weeks is actually going through that process with them and kind of doing it for them so that they can learn some of the lessons that they went through, but also from the research that I've been doing. So that if there is a second wave, or there's a war, or aliens invade, or whatever the next unprecedented thing is, then the people really are kind of ready for it.
I was going to ask you actually about sharing maybe some top tips from your crisis management learnings. I mean, would that actually be one of them, is to go back and do a debrief of what's happened and kind of, really sit down and look at what happened and the processes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a valuable learning opportunity because we so rarely get to practice these muscles in real life. You know, you might do your tabletop exercises or your fire drills, but this was like a real life crisis that happened to every single institution in the country, and that's such a valuable learning opportunity. There's a sort of crisis management scholar called Patrick Lagadick who calls crises an abrupt and brutal audit, which I really love, and I've stolen that title for my dissertation because I think that's the most important role that a crisis does. It offers that opportunity to just really assess your skills at dealing with crisis, and it's too good an opportunity to pass up, really.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of want to talk about what comes next for the sector in terms of how people have been cooperating and sharing their knowledge. You know, I want to ask you both, what do you see next? I mean, like you said, Rachel, we are the crisis isn't ended. We're still in the middle of it. It's just mutating and changing every day. Do you think that this is something that's here to stay, the level of support that people have been offering? What do you think it will look like and will continue to look like as we go into 2021?
I think you're right. I don't think it's a new thing. I think the sector has always been super open and helpful. In fact, one of the people that I interviewed made the point that, you know, if you were the head of Marks and Spencer's, you couldn't ring up Next and be like, how much money did you make last week? You just wouldn't do it. Whereas there always has been that within the sector. So I think it's not something that people have just done because there's a crisis. It's something that has been ongoing throughout. I mean, it's definitely come out. In my research, one of the big themes was how great the sector was, and actually that sort of filled a bit of a gap in terms of maybe the communication from official channels wasn't always the clearest in terms of those kind of useful government briefings.
Which ended very quickly.
Yeah. And actually, even somebody I was interviewing as well, even the fact that they were at 5 o'clock meant that you couldn't make changes for the next day in your attraction. So things like that, just, you know, so so it really kind of plugged a hole that was needed to be filled in terms of support and information and experience. Most of that came from the sector. In fact, in one of the surveys that I did, 81% of people said that the most useful thing in terms of resources was information from their colleagues in the sector, way above kind of government updates. So yeah, it's something that has always been in the sector, but has just come out a lot stronger. I think as we go forward, what I'm kind of worried about is the slightly more junior level. So again, those first line managers, because in my research it came out that they didn't necessarily have the same sort of networks as their more senior colleagues, that they felt a little bit more disconnected from the sector. So whilst we already had all these networks in place and we just kind of turned it up, they didn't necessarily have that. And now I worry if this is, a state that's here to stay, that how are they going to go to those networking events? How are they going to, get started and build those networks? I really don't want a whole generation of visitor experience managers to lose out on kind of having that wider network, because, as we've seen, it is so important. But then again, I think a lot of these things grow organically, and people will find a way. I mean, when I first started out as a manager, there wasn't the kind of networks that you get in Twitter now. Even just in museums, there's sort of, Museum as Muck, Museum Detox, Front of House Museums, all these grassroots kind of groups that have grown up, and a lot of it does happen online. So maybe that is, maybe that's the way forward. But I think it would be a shame if people couldn't meet face to face and have these conversations that we all know are really useful.
Yeah, for sure. But it's about finding the ways that they can continue until we can get back to that point of doing more of the face-to-face things. I mean, Carlton, maybe, just hearing from what Rachel said, maybe that's something that the Visitor Experience Forum can concentrate on, is that kind of slightly junior level of people that don't have the network. The Visitor Experience Forum could be something that is kind of key to that level of
yeah, you're definitely right. Again, we're here for everybody who needs our support as much. I mean, we're mainly focused on senior management, but there's always a need for kind of the next generation of people in the industry that need that support. I remember working in the industry way long time ago, and didn't have any support at all during my career when I came up. So having kind of forum there in place, it has definitely helped out, but also having the members who are attending the forum to share that information as well is key.
Yeah,
as well, it's no point holding that information in you. Sharing that as well is very, very important.
And also I think it's the responsibility of senior managers to make sure that those people who are coming up in their team do have access to that. Yeah. I mean, I started going to the Visitor Experience Forum all those years ago because a more senior colleague brought me along, so it's a responsibility that I think people have to take seriously. You have to sort of usher them into the world, and I hope that they don't get too drunk.
Yeah. It's probably more likely to be us getting drunk, isn't it? Let's face it.
Very true, very true.
I've loved speaking to you both. I've got one more question for you both before we end the podcast today. And I always like to ask our guests if there's been a book that's helped shape their career in some way, or just a book that they absolutely love that they'd love to share with our guests.
Yes, so I've got one, which is it's very kind of heritage focused, but it's called Anarchist's Guide to Historic House Museums, by Franklin Bagnoni and Deborah Ryan, and it really challenges what it means to be a historic house museum, and kind of goes against that kind of very staid guided tour model, and kind of looks at what can it be as a visitor experience and what can it be in terms of community value. The author, Frank, he also does a project called One Night Stand, where he goes and sleeps in different historic houses and then sort of does a blog on it. He's American, but he came to do one at Kew Palace, and obviously we wouldn't let him anywhere near the beds, but it was amazing. And it's really the way he sees kind of historic houses is really shaped like how I now deal with my historic properties. And he's all about kind of trying to use the house in a natural way as possible. One of the properties that I manage at Kew is Queen Charlotte's Cottage, and it's a folly. It was never lived in. It was just it's just a really posh summer house. And we used to take people around in a sort of tour. And then I realised that the point of that was so that the royal family could enjoy the gardens. And the minute I realised that, it just completely changed how we used that space. And then we put deck chairs, garden games out, and it was about the outside of the cottage, not the inside.
Right.
And so I think that's really helped me to sort of see, actually, if you can get as close as possible to the original purpose of that building, it just becomes a much more natural visitor experience. So yeah, that book has really kind of shaped my thinking in terms of that.
Oh, I love it. That's great. I really love that. I really love that experience that you've been through, kind of with the folly, and understanding, what it is that they're not actually coming to look at the folly. It's almost about being inside it and looking out at everything else.
Right. It's about the visitor experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who knew? Carlton, what about you? Do you have one that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think that there's one book that I've kind of read and really enjoyed, and it's called Outside In, and it's very American style, but it really focuses on how to put your customer in the center in everything you do. So it talks about the different kinds of frameworks, kind of like customer journey mapping, empathy mapping, and why that is very important. But it also gives you like really cool case studies as well in that book. So yeah, Outside In. I can't remember who is written by, but for me, that's that one that kind of jumps out at me.
Brilliant. Great book recommendations. Well, as ever, if you would like to win a copy of those books, if you head over to our Twitter account, which is skip_the_Q, and retweet this episode announcement with the comment, "I want Carlton and Rachel's books," then you'll be in with a chance of winning them. It's been really brilliant to have you both on today. What we're going to do in the show notes, we will we'll link out to the Visitor Experience Forum. It's free to join the Visitor Experience Forum, which is incredible. And we'll put all of the details on how to do that in the show notes. Rachel, we will link out to your blog. If you can just give us the domain name for that.
Yeah, so it's therecoveryroomblog.com. And I've actually just put some new resources up there. So yesterday, there's some practical resources that have just gone up, which is a site shutdown template so that you can plan for another lockdown. And also some practical training scenarios that you can use for crisis management tabletop exercises. So there's lots of free practical stuff going up there in the next few weeks as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. It is incredibly useful. Please go and check that out. It is a really, really great resource. All the links to it will be in the show notes. And that just leaves me to say a massive thank you for having you both on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having us. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find us. And remember to follow us on Twitter for your chance to win the books that have been mentioned. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcriptions from this episode and more over on our website, rubbercheese.com/podcast.